Family reunion turns into a murder investigation. I am Emma Johnson, the eldest of 3 siblings. My family and I gathered for a reunion in Willow Creek, our childhood town, to reconnect after the devastating loss of our dad. The weight of his absence hung over us like a dark cloud, making this reunion feel more like a burden than a celebration. It was meant to be a day filled with laughter and love, but little did we know, the day would take a dark turn that none of us expected. As I drove into Willow Creek, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me. The streets were lined with blooming flowers, and the scent of fresh-cut grass reminded me of carefree childhood days spent racing my brother Jake and sister Lily to the park. But this time, that familiar comfort felt tainted. I hadn't been back since Dad passed away, and now it felt like every corner of the town whispered memories that both comforted and tormented me. Arriving at our childhood home, the familiar smell of grilled burgers wafted through the open windows, but I couldn't shake the heaviness in the air. My heart raced as I stepped out of my car, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions inside me. The backyard was filled with family, but instead of joy, it felt like we were all putting on brave faces to mask our grief. When I entered the backyard, I spotted Jake tossing a frisbee with his 2 kids, while Lily sat cross-legged on a blanket, sketching. And there was Mom, Maggie, standing by the grill, a faint smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a scene that should have brought comfort, but I could sense the unspoken tensions lurking beneath the surface. "Emma," Jake shouted, his face lighting up when he saw me. "You made it." "Of course. Wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, forcing a smile as I embraced him. His warmth felt good, but the lingering tension reminded me of the heaviness we were all carrying. "Mom's been looking forward to this," he continued, ruffling his kid's hair. "You know how she gets when the whole family's together." "Yeah," I replied, glancing at Maggie. She was trying so hard to keep the mood light, flipping burgers and chatting with anyone who would listen. I wanted to be supportive, but I could feel the unease settling in my stomach. As I settled down at the picnic table, Lily looked up from her sketchbook. "Hey, Emma, how's work going?" "Busy as always," I replied, taking a sip from my drink. "Just got promoted, actually." "Wow, look at you. Always chasing the next big thing," Jake teased, but I caught a hint of bitterness in his voice. "What's that supposed to mean?" I snapped, my defenses rising. "Nothing. Just, you know how you are," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Guys, can we not do this now?" Lily interjected, her frustration bubbling over. "It's supposed to be a family gathering." The tension lingered in the air as we fell into reluctant silence. After dinner, we gathered around the fire pit, the flames casting flickering shadows across our faces. I could feel the unspoken words hovering, waiting for the right moment to spill out. "Can I say something?" I finally blurted out, breaking the silence. "I feel like we're all pretending everything's fine when it's not." Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. "Emma, you've always been the one to bring the mood down. Can't we just enjoy this?" "That's rich coming from you." I shot back, anger flaring. "You think it's easy for me? I've been trying to balance my career and family, but all you see is me working late. Maybe if you spent less time chasing promotions and more time with us, you'd understand what we're going through," Jake replied, frustration etched on his face. Lily's voice rose above the crackling fire. "Can we please stop this? It's not helping anyone. Everyone's on edge because of Dad," Jake said, his voice cracking. "We can't just ignore that he's gone." Maggie stepped in, her voice trembling. "This isn't what your father would have wanted. He would want us to support each other, not tear each other apart." Just as the tension reached its peak, a car pulled up, disrupting our heated exchange. A tall, stern-looking man stepped out, Detective Harris. My heart sank. Why was he here? "Good evening, everyone," he said, glancing around. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I need to speak with the Johnson family about your father's case." "What case?" I asked, my heart racing. "Your father's death was ruled an accident," he said, his voice steady. "But we've received new information suggesting it may have been something more sinister." The air went still. Jake's face paled. "What do you mean?" "There are questions regarding the circumstances surrounding his accident. "We believe someone might have been involved," he replied, his gaze piercing. Maggie looked stricken, her hands trembling. "That's not possible. He was just... Mom, please," I said gently. "What does this mean?" Detective Harris glanced around, his expression serious. "I need your cooperation. We have reason to believe someone close to him may know more than they're letting on." Update 1. It has been a week since Detective Harris's shocking revelation, and the atmosphere in our family has changed drastically. We spent the last few days in a state of shock, processing the implications of his words. Every morning brought fresh anxiety as we awaited updates from the police, feeling like we were living in a nightmare. Detective Harris began interviewing us one by one, and the stress of our personal conflicts was compounded by the looming specter of a criminal investigation. Tension filled our home like an unwanted guest. "Emma, you need to be careful," Jake said one evening, his voice low. "They're looking into everyone. What if they suspect you?" "Me? Why would they suspect me?" I shot back, anger bubbling. "I was the one who was always there for Dad, even when you weren't." "Guys, this isn't helping," Lily interjected, her face pale. "We need to focus on finding out the truth." Maggie sat quietly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I can't believe this is happening. We just lost him." As the investigation unfolded, secrets began to emerge. I learned that my father had been involved in a legal dispute over a property he had inherited, and there were whispers of shady dealings. "Emma, did Dad ever mention anything about someone threatening him?" Jake asked one night, concern etched on his face. "No," I replied, shaking my head, "but he was worried about the property. He thought someone was trying to take advantage of him." The atmosphere grew even tenser as Detective Harris continued to dig deeper. Each new piece of information felt like another layer of complexity added to our grief. It was exhausting, and I felt as if the walls were closing in. Days turned into weeks, and the tension only grew as Detective Harris continued to gather evidence. We were all on edge, unable to escape the suffocating weight of uncertainty. "I just want to know the truth," Lily said one evening, tears welling in her eyes. "What if we find out someone we know is involved?" "Let's just focus on supporting each other," I replied, trying to maintain a sense of calm. "We'll figure this out together." Update 2. Another week has passed, and I found myself at the courthouse, sifting through documents related to the property case. I stumbled upon a name that sent chills down my spine: Greg Thompson, a local businessman who had been in a heated dispute with my father. When I returned home, I confronted my siblings. I found something. Dad had a dispute with Greg Thompson. He might know more about what happened. "Do you think he's involved?" Jake asked, concern etched on his face. "I don't know, but we need to figure this out before the police do," I insisted. "We can't let them think we had anything to do with it." As we discussed the implications, the tension in the room thickened. "What if he's dangerous?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then we need to be careful," Jake replied, his brow furrowed. "But we can't let fear stop us from seeking the truth." That week, our family therapy sessions became more heated. The grief we carried was manifesting as anger toward each other, making the sessions feel like a battleground. "Why can't you see how hard this is for all of us?" Jake yelled one evening. "You're so wrapped up in your own world." "Me? You're the one acting like a victim." I shot back, my voice rising. "I'm trying to be here for all of us, and you're making it impossible." Lily, caught in the crossfire, pleaded, "Can't we just take a step back? We're all hurting. This fighting won't bring Dad back." That moment sparked something in me. "You know what? Maybe we should confront Greg ourselves," I suggested. "He's the only one who might have answers," and I refused to sit back and wait for the police to take action. My siblings exchanged worried glances, but finally nodded in agreement. We made a plan to confront Greg Thompson and demand answers about what he knew regarding our father's death. Update 3. The confrontation and final resolution, days later. Today marked a turning point in our search for the truth. Armed with information and a determination to confront Greg Thompson, we arrived at his office, nerves humming with anxiety. The building loomed over us, a stark reminder of the business dealings that may have cost Dad his life. Are we really doing this? Lily whispered, glancing at me nervously. We have to, I replied firmly. We deserve answers. As we entered, the sterile air of the office felt oppressive. Greg sat behind a large desk, his demeanor casual as if he hadn't a care in the world. He looked up, surprised to see us. Emma, what brings you here? He asked, feigning innocence. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady. About Dad. His expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. I don't think there's anything to discuss. Jake stepped forward, fists clenched. You were involved in a dispute with him. Did you threaten him? Greg leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. Threats? You're overreacting. It was just business. Just business? I scoffed. You don't understand what it feels like to lose someone you love. His gaze hardened. Don't play the victim here, Emma. Your father was too stubborn for his own good. He didn't know when to back down. With those words, the tension in the room reached a boiling point. You're lying, I shouted. What did you do to him? Greg shrugged, his nonchalance infuriating. Look, accidents happen. If your father had just accepted the deal, none of this would have happened. I felt a surge of rage. You think this is a joke? You think you can just brush it off? Suddenly, the door swung open, and Detective Harris stepped in. What's going on here? He demanded, surveying the situation. I took a deep breath, desperate for validation. We need to know if Greg had anything to do with Dad's death. Detective Harris turned to Greg, his expression hardening. You're aware this could be serious. We've gathered enough evidence to question your involvement. Greg's demeanor shifted, and I could see the panic flicker in his eyes. I didn't do anything. You have to believe me. In that moment, everything shifted. Greg's bravado crumbled under the weight of the detective's scrutiny, and I felt a sense of triumph. We weren't powerless anymore. Final update. Finally, the trial date arrived, 3 weeks after we first learned about the possibility of foul play. The courtroom was filled with reporters and community members eager to hear the details. As we sat together, I felt the weight of our father's legacy resting heavily on our shoulders. It felt surreal, as if we were in a movie rather than living this nightmare. When it was my turn to testify, I stood, my hands trembling. I looked around the room, seeing faces filled with curiosity and judgment. I loved my father. He was a good man who didn't deserve this, I managed to say, my voice cracking. As I glanced at Jake and Lily, I could see the weight of the moment on their faces. We need to stand together, no matter what happens, I whispered to them, knowing this was our chance to honor Dad's memory. Detective Harris presented phone records, witnesses, and other incriminating evidence that linked Greg to the circumstances surrounding Dad's death. It was intense, and I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut. After several days of testimony, the jury finally returned with a verdict, guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Relief washed over me, but it felt bittersweet. We had fought hard for Dad's memory, yet the pain of his loss still lingered. As we left the courthouse, I turned to Jake and Lily. Thank you for standing together. We did this for Dad. Maggie hugged us tightly, tears in her eyes. We'll always be a family, no matter what happens. In the weeks since, we tried to rebuild our lives. The pain of losing Dad was still there, but we were learning to cherish the good memories and honor his legacy. Family therapy sessions had been difficult but necessary, each session unearthing deeper emotions. We shared stories about Dad, reminiscing about the silly things he did that made us laugh. Remember that time he tried to grill for the first time and almost set the backyard on fire? Lily chuckled one evening. Yeah, and he acted like it was part of the plan. Jake added, grinning. Those small moments of joy reminded me that while the pain would never fully fade, we had each other to lean on. We made a pact to keep Dad's memory alive, sharing stories and traditions that reminded us of his love. As time passed, I felt a renewed sense of hope for our family. The wounds were still fresh, but we were learning to navigate our grief together. We planted a tree in the backyard in memory of Dad, a living tribute to the love he had given us. This will be my last update. While the journey of healing is ongoing, I felt it was important to share how far we've come. We are stronger together, and we are determined to move forward, carrying Dad's memory with us. Thanks for listening, Reddit. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, but I felt hopeful for the future. Together, we'll find peace amid the chaos.